this lesson we're going to learn how to apply some of the principles of animation to an axe or tomahawk that's being thrown. And the principles that we're going to be looking at are, of course, timing, the time it takes for the axe to travel across the scene. Okay, and we're going to be looking at the principle of arc. So we can see we've got a little bit of an arc happening in here. It's not just going straight across the scene. And we're going to be looking at the principle of ease in and ease out. All right. So let's go ahead and get started with this. I'm going to come in here and select my axe. So this axe is just a model. It doesn't have any rig on it, so I'm just setting keyframes on the actual mesh, which is a little unusual. Usually there's a rig that goes along with this, but since there's no squash and stretch happening here, we're just basically going from point A to point B, creating an arc, and working with the timing of this, and the ease in and ease out. All right, so I'm going to come in here and delete the keyframes in my scene, and just highlighting these, deleting. So I'm going to go ahead and get this in the start position. I'm over here on frame 1, so I'm going to set the axe up for frame 1 and just bring it back here and rotate it back in this position. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And if I'm looking at it more from a side view here, get out here like that, we can see where the axe is in relationship to where it's going to hit on the target. So it's actually above the target a little bit. So that's kind of a short person throwing the axe here. If somebody were a little bit taller, it would probably be up right about here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start it there. And before I get started with the animation, it's really important to go out and reference some type of similar action happening out in the real world. So I went out to YouTube and I found this guy who tosses axes at targets like this. You can see this tomahawk flying through the air here in slow motion. And this is the only one I was able to find in slow motion. So there might be more out there, but this is what I came up with. And we're not going to toss it with this kind of distance, but what's really nice to look at is just where the axe is pivoting. So this pivot point makes a big difference in the believability of this axe being thrown in 3D. And we can see the weight of it is really pivoting very close to the head. Okay. So I'm going to come actually down here to the very end. I think this is his kid tossing an axe in slow motion. This is more of what we're doing. So we're just doing a single spin like this. And what's nice here too is that the handle actually picks up a little bit of, or the slow motion picks up some of the vibration of the handle when it hits. So this is more of what we're doing here. Okay. Let's come back out to our scene in Maya. And right now I'm noticing where my pivot is. It's right in the center of our axe, and that's not where we want to see it spinning. Okay, the weight of it is up here, so I'm going to move the pivot point up to this point. Okay, I'm going to hit B on the keyboard. That allows me to move the pivot point. I'm going to hold down the V key so I'm snapping on vertices. And I'm going to just click and drag. It's going to kind of skip up here and looking for something kind of in the middle, maybe right about there. That's probably about where the weight is sitting on this axe, balancing between the weight of the handle and the weight of the blade up here, or the head. And maybe we'll just snap it down right to here. Okay. I'm going to hit D on the keyboard again. I'm going to come out to my perspective view and just hit F on the keyboard and make sure that we're centered this way, and we're not. So I'm going to just do that again, D on the keyboard, hold down the V key, and I'm going to snap this over to the center right there. Great. Okay. Alright, so here's my start point. I'm on frame 1. And this is going to travel, we're not very far away, so this is probably going to travel across here in less than a second. I'm going to set my animation to be 18 frames long. We'll start with that and see how that looks. Okay, so for frame 1, I'm actually going to zero out all this information right here. Since I moved it around a little bit, I'm going to come up to Modify, Freeze Transformations, and this will be my starting point. Okay, I'm going to hit S on the keyboard. That's going to set our first keyframe. We can see that everything is highlighted in red over here. And down here on the timeline, on frame 1, we've got our first tick mark here. Okay? Great. Let's go down to frame 18, click on that, and let's move our axe into position. I'm going to hit F on the keyboard, get in there a little closer, E on the keyboard to rotate it, and I'm just going to rotate in the x-axis right here. Okay, so I want it right about 45 degrees. This is sort of overthrowing the axe right here, so right about here I think looks good. And then I'm going to just sink it in, maybe right about there, sink it into the wood a little bit, like that. Great. So the axe is not going to fly perfectly across here. It's probably going to have some variation to it. I'm just going to come in here and maybe rotate it a little bit to the side like that. Okay? We could even rotate it a little bit this way too, just so it's not perfectly mechanical and coming straight across. Alright, so that's my end frame. I'm going to hit S on the keyboard and record that. Down here in my graph editor, I'm going to hit F and we can frame up on our keyframes. Okay, so we've got 2 keyframes on frame 1 and frame 18. Let's back out here and take a look at what we've got. I'm just going to click off on the background and we can see what it's doing. Okay, so it's just going from point A to point B, frame 1 to frame 18, and it doesn't look very exciting or believable. As far as playback goes, if you're not getting an accurate playback, come down here and click on this little guy running with the gear behind him. This is the shortcut to the animation settings in the time slider. Under playback here, you want to make sure you're playing real-time 24. If your computer is fast enough, you can play every frame, but you definitely want to set the maximum playback speed to real-time 24. You don't want it doing free or half or anything like that. Quite often it will default to free. If it does this, it will be playing much faster than it is really meant to be. So we'll set this to real time. Okay, and just hit save. Alright, and over here in our playbacks, I'm just going to play through this again and we can see what's going on. Alright, so we've addressed the timing issue initially. We've got our timing happening from frame 1 to 18. So the next principle we want to take a look at is ease in and ease out. Right now, the axe is starting off slow, it's picking up speed, and then it slows down again at the end. And we don't want this. We want it to maintain a fairly steady speed across here and not slow down. Let's stop that. Let's select the axe. And we can find this pretty quickly what's going on here. So it's translating across the scene along the z-axis. And this is our curve right here. If your curve isn't filling up the graph editor like this, just hit F on the keyboard and it will frame up on the curve. Okay? So we can clearly see on frame 1 we've got some ease in happening, and then it picks up speed, and then right around frame 12 it starts to ease out again. We definitely don't want that. So on each end of these points here, these keyframes, we have something called tangents. I'm going to grab this tangent right here and I'm going to bring it up like this. So I'm making a little bit more of an arc. So it is easing in, but it's not easing out here. I've taken out that ease out at the end. Let's play that. Okay, that's looking a little better. I think it's hanging in the air just a little bit too much here. Let's grab this one and also bring it down. Okay, we've got a slight arc here. We're not completely linear. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. Okay, so it's traveling at a pretty consistent velocity right now. We may need to shorten up our frame here just because it doesn't look like it's really traveling fast enough. What I might do right now is just go ahead and select both of these, shift select, and come over here where it says linear tangents and click that. We definitely have a flat line now with no ease in or ease out. Let's click that. Okay, it still feels like it's slowing down a little bit at the end. I think that has to do with our timing. Okay, we could accomplish this a couple different ways. We could shorten this down, or we could take this and back it up a little bit, maybe to here, and hit S on the keyboard. Let's try playing that. Okay, that looks a little better. We may have to come back and adjust the timing again. All right. So we're going to talk about arc now. So as this is coming across our scene here, we want to see a little bit of an arc happening. Not much. I mean, when they're tossed that hard, they tend to fly in a pretty straight line. We're going to add a little bit of an arc as though it's being tossed up in the air, a little bit more like it was in that last scene with the boy throwing it. So about halfway down here on the timeline, just a little past halfway on frame 10, I'm going to raise this up in the y-axis, maybe to right about here. I don't want to keyframe everything else in here. I just want to keyframe on this particular translation. So I'm going to come over to the Translate Y, which I just moved, click on this, right mouse click, and say Key Selected. Okay? So we don't see a keyframe showing up here on this particular tangent because we're on the Translate Z. Let's look at Translate Y. Alright, there's our keyframe that we just put in. Let's hit F on the keyboard and we can see what's going on here. We actually have another ease in and ease out happening that we don't want. Let's play this. Okay. Let's create a little bit nicer arc here. I'm going to grab this and remove the ease out. As you recall, it's actually starting in a higher position here on frame 1. We're up pretty high. It's coming across and now it's falling down towards the end. So it feels like it's falling maybe just a little too quickly at the end, or we could actually take this keyframe right here and with my middle mouse button I'm going to pull it up a little bit higher. I'm holding down the Alt key and dragging this down. If you're in a Mac, it's going to be your Option key. So you navigate the same way in here as you do out here. Okay? Again, we've got some ease in and ease out happening. I'm going to select this one and adjust the tangent. Same thing down here. I don't want that ease out. I'm just going to click on that tangent. And now we've got a nice arc happening right here. I'm going to adjust this a little bit just so it's not falling off so quickly. Okay, let's play that. Alright, that's starting to look good. Alright, the next thing we need to do is get that rotation in. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go down to my end frame here, hit F on the keyboard so I can frame up on my axe. I'm going to hit E on the keyboard and I'm going to rotate it along the x-axis, which is the red curve here. So we're going to do one full rotation. It's rotating forward like this, and then I'm going to bring it back around here and end in a position that's close to where it was. And I'm going to hit S on the keyboard. So I'm going to click on that Y rotate. I'm going to just hit F in here so we can see it. We've also got to ease in and ease out to deal with here. Okay, let's just scrub through here and see what's happening in our scene. I'm going to go back to frame 1, click off here so we can see the axe, and now we can see that rotation happening. Okay, and the weight of it looks good. Our pivot point is happening where it needs to be, right about here. So the weight of it looks believable. Okay, let's go back and adjust those curves and get rid of the ease in and ease out. I'm going to select the axe. I'm going to come down to the X rotate and grab the last frame here, our keyframe, and drag this up and drag this down a little bit. So I'm almost linear. I'm going to try this first, see what it looks like. Go ahead and play that. So that's looking fairly good. I'm just scrubbing through here. So it feels like the arc is just a little bit off. Okay, let's use a tool that allows us to visualize that arc a little bit better so we can see what's going on. I'm under the animation menu set, and under visualize we have some tools that allow us to see what's going on with our animation. Let's select our axe. I'm going to hit Q on the keyboard so we just see the axe right here without the manipulator on it. Under visualize, I'm going to select create editable motion trail. Open up that option box. Right now our time slider is going all the way to 24, and that's not really what we want. We're just going to use a start to end frame, and we're going to put that in ourselves. So frame 1 to frame 18, enter, and we're going to create the motion trail now. Great. Now we can visualize what our arc looks like. So what's happening right here, what makes it feel like it's falling off so abruptly, is that we have this sort of flat line happening right here. Let's grab this point right here, and we can use the move tool and actually drag this around until we have something that we like. We can even reposition this right here if we feel like it's not in quite the right spot. Okay, I'm going to try this and play it and see how that looks. That's actually feeling pretty good. Let's just check some of the translations still. We've got our translate Z, which is the axe moving across the scene. I'm going to delete this keyframe right here because we don't need it. Okay, let's come down here. This is our rotate, and there's a little bit of an ease in and ease out happening here. I'm going to go ahead and select the tangent right here and go to linear. Okay, let's play that and see how that looks. That feels pretty good. I still feel like there's a pretty heavy drop off right here. Let's see what happens if we pull this down just a little bit. If we pull this back just a little bit. All right, I'm pretty happy with that. Let's go ahead and save our scene. File, save scene as, and I'm out here in my directory that I created earlier called Project 1 Axe Throw. In the scenes directory, I'm going to do a version 2 right here, so I've just got Project 1 Axe Anim, short for animation, first name, last name, and I'm going to drop in version 2. and make sure that I'm saving it as Maya ASCII and hit enter. All right. So this motion trail handle is right here. I can actually hide that by hitting H on the keyboard and coming out here and playing my scene. Okay, so this covers the animation for the scene here and the three principles that we were addressing: timing, arc, and ease in and ease out. If I wanted to speed this up, I could actually come down here on the timeline and hold down the Shift key and drag across that keyframe. And from here I can grab this arrow and pull it down. Let's try frame 16 and see what that looks like. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and back this up to frame 1 and play that. Okay, that feels like it's not hanging in the air so long. All right. I'm going to stop that. And that covers our animation for this scene. We've covered 3 of the principles of animation. We've covered timing, arc, and ease in and ease out. Great. So go ahead and have some fun with this and try some different tosses from different starting points and have some fun with it.